Modern Indian Poetry and Its Context, by Vinay Dharwadkar. Introduction. Vinay Dharwadkar's essay, Modern Indian Poetry and Its Contexts, delves into the intricate relationship between modern Indian poetry and the broader world in which it exists. The central premise is that modern Indian poems are deeply intertwined with their historical, social, and cultural contexts, which shape their meanings and significance. The essay highlights the multifaceted ways in which poems are connected to their surroundings. Multiplicity of contexts. The essay emphasizes that modern Indian poetry draws its meaningfulness and cultural value from various contextual elements. It underscores the interconnectedness between poems, authors, readers, languages, traditions, and cultures. This intricate web of connections creates layers of significance and impact. The essay argues that these contexts are vital for comprehending the intricacies of modern Indian poetry. Challenges in reading contexts. Contextual analysis poses challenges due to the complexity and simultaneity of various contexts, including local, regional, and national ones. The essay recognizes that understanding these contexts requires navigating the relationships between poems, authors, readers, languages, and traditions. The intricate interplay between different Indian languages and their histories adds another layer of complexity to the task of unraveling the contexts. Importance of contextual discussion. Despite the difficulties, the essay asserts that discussing the contexts of modern Indian poetry is essential. Such discussions provide a historical framework for the poetry that spans different mother tongues. By shedding light on the relationships between poems, poets, languages, and traditions, context-driven analysis helps unveil hidden meanings, resolve ambiguities, facilitate comparisons, and ultimately enhance the comprehension of modern Indian poetry. Focus on three broad contexts. Dharwadkar's essay strategically narrows its focus to three overarching contexts, which serve as foundational frameworks for understanding modern Indian poetry. These contexts encompass historical, literary, and social dimensions and provide lenses through which individual poems, poets, languages, and traditions can be situated and analyzed. While acknowledging the limitations of an all-encompassing analysis, the essay seeks to establish a sturdy basis for comprehending the diverse world of Indian poetry. Principal historical contexts. The essay delves into the pivotal role played by various movements, schools, styles, and factions in shaping modern Indian poetry. Throughout the 20th century, these movements have emerged at both national and local levels, influencing poets and their works. The essay highlights notable movements like nationalism, romanticism, progressivism, and modernism. It explores how these movements have impacted poetry, creating a dynamic landscape of poetic expression across languages. Local and regional contexts. The essay goes beyond national movements to examine the unique development of local and regional schools within individual languages. For instance, Hindi poetry has witnessed a series of movements such as idealism, romanticism, progressivism, modernism, and experimentalism. These local contexts interact with and contribute to the broader national movements, enriching the tapestry of Indian poetry with diverse influences and perspectives. Diversity of poetic change. The essay emphasizes that the ebb and flow of factions, schools, movements, and counter-movements drive the evolution of Indian poetry. These movements define literary philosophies, political stances, thematic explorations, styles, and techniques. By understanding these shifts, readers can differentiate between various types of poetry, discern authors' intentions, and appreciate the intricate connections that span languages and traditions. The essay discusses the multiple contexts influencing 19th and 20th century Indian poetry, encompassing Indian and foreign literatures, social environments, and various literary relationships. These contexts shape the emergence of Indian modernity and provide insight into the dynamics of poetic movements. Foreign influences and intertextual relationships. The influence of foreign influences has played a pivotal role in the emergence of Indian modernity within the context of intertextual relationships. Older subcontinental literatures, regarded as domestic sources, have been consistently explored by Indian poets in their quest for novelty, modernity, and meaning. The analysis of modern Indian poetry in the context of various literatures reveals phenomena that historical analysis of poetic movements alone cannot explain. Roles of Indian sources and foreign influences. Both Indian sources and foreign influences contribute differently to modern Indian poetry, each serving distinct purposes. English literature has pervasively influenced various Indian language traditions since the 19th century, while other Western literatures, like French, have impacted specific linguistic communities in unique ways. The French connection has profoundly influenced Bengali poets and their works, leaving distinctive marks on their style, themes, and attitudes towards modernity. Variety of influences. Spanish poetry from Latin America, notably Pablo Neruda's work, has garnered widespread interest among Indian poets across various languages. American beat poetry, particularly influenced by Allen Ginsberg, has also made a significant impact, although not as deeply as English Romantic, Victorian, and High Modernist writing. The essay suggests that foreign influences function not only at the level of entire literatures but also within specific genres and through individual author connections. Indian literatures as context. Indian literatures provide a rich context for modern Indian poetry, allowing for revival, retrieval, reworking, and renovation of the poetic imagination on native soil. Modern poets draw from diverse Indian literary traditions, incorporating themes, forms, and voices from Dravidian and Indo-Aryan Bhakti poetry, Vedic hymns, oral traditions, and regional classics. Heterogeneous social world. The social world significantly shapes modern Indian poets' lives, education, identities, relationships, and understanding of authorship and literary conventions. Modern Indian poets come from various social classes, including upper class, middle class, and marginalized backgrounds, reflecting a spectrum of social positions. Diverse artistic pursuits. Many modern Indian poets are multifaceted artists, engaging in various literary forms beyond poetry, such as short stories, novels, plays, literary criticism, essays, and more. Some poets integrate their careers as writers, intellectuals, scholars, and translators, bridging linguistic and cultural boundaries. Media and engagement. Modern Indian poets engage with audiences through various media, including print, poetry readings, literary conferences, cultural festivals, and international exchanges. The essay emphasizes the dynamic interaction between poets and their readers, both within India and on a global scale. Versatility and integration. Modern Indian poets exhibit versatility in their artistic achievements, spanning different literary forms and genres. The tradition of versatility goes back in history, with notable examples like Rabindranath Tagore, who excelled in various creative pursuits and contributed significantly to Indian culture and literature. Social heterogeneity. The essay discusses the heterogeneity of the social world in modern Indian poetry and the transformations it has undergone in the post-colonial era. It touches upon the emergence of women poets and writers from marginalized communities. This diversity shapes the poets' lives, education, relationships, and literary identities, reflecting the complex landscape of Indian society. Emergence of women poets. The essay highlights the significant increase in the number of women poets in the post-colonial period. It notes that while there were few prominent women poets before independence, there has been a sharp rise in their presence since the 1950s. This trend mirrors broader changes in women's roles in society, education, and professions. Notable women poets from various languages are mentioned, showing the expansion of women's contributions in literature. Impact on Indian English poetry. The development of women poets in Indian English poetry serves as a measure of broader societal change. The essay chronicles the progression of women poets in this domain. It points out that the 1960s had isolated figures, while the 1970s saw the emergence of a community of women poets. The 1980s and early 1990s brought more poets into the fold, reshaping the landscape and diversifying perspectives. Empowerment of marginalized communities. The essay explores how writers from suppressed or marginalized social groups have influenced Indian literature. It describes the rise of poets from lower class and lower caste backgrounds, who challenged traditional literary canons. This trend, exemplified by the Dalit movement in Maharashtra, transformed political activism into poetry, fiction, autobiography, and essays. Reimagining the literary landscape. The essay highlights that both women poets and writers from marginalized communities have significantly altered the social context of modern Indian poetry. This shift forces a re-evaluation of common assumptions about literary traditions, aesthetics, canons, and their connections to power structures. Their emergence has broadened the scope of contemporary poetry and literature, leading to a changing and uncertain landscape. Generational transition and future outlook. The essay concludes by discussing a new generation of writers born after partition and independence. These writers, known as the children of midnight's children, have grown up in a post-colonial India that is distinct from the earlier era. This generation, including figures like Vikram Seth and Amitav Ghosh, will continue to shape Indian literature and redefine the concept of India itself, marking a new cycle of change. Final thoughts. The essay comprehensively examines the diverse social, historical, and literary contexts that have influenced modern Indian poetry. It underscores the evolving nature of Indian literature, reflecting the societal transformations and contributions of women poets and writers from marginalized backgrounds. The essay predicts that new generations will continue to redefine Indian literature, perpetuating a cycle of change and adaptation.